Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the Wednesday, October 30th slate of college football DFS. We have got two more games of Q's action, Conference USA action going on here on this Wednesday. We are going to break down both games and tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups on this two-game slate. Now, if you have not checked it out already, make sure you check out our episode for the Tuesday slate where we discuss Tuesday's three-game slate. Like I said yesterday, I can't promise that I'm going to be able to get in all of these midweek slates. But we've got an opportunity tonight where there's no PGA golf tournament this week. DraftKings did put up the salaries for Wednesday. Haven't had time to do the full research for the Saturday show yet, but it was real easy for me to whip up the research for these two games and get this show out to you guys. The only thing that kind of upset me about this week's schedule is that my alma mater, the Charlotte 49ers, team that I know a lot about, is playing on Thursday night, and they're the only game on Thursday night somehow. And so they're on a standalone slate. They're going to be getting a showdown slate as opposed to being on a full slate. I was really hoping I'd be able to get to talk about my Charlotte 49ers for a full slate, but I digress. That will not be happening this week. Oh, well. Anyway, we're here to break down the Wednesday night slate. So let's go ahead and get started. If you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of the college football season, as well as our upcoming college basketball content that's starting next week. And also, if this video helps you out in any way, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that, and I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate it when you guys do that. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. If you are a fan of running the football, then this is the slate for you. We've got three teams on this slate that run the ball heavy, along with one that absolutely does not. And so I think that has to play a large role in how you construct your teams here on this slate is, am I playing, the running backs from this side that's I know is going to get the ball run a lot? Am I playing the receivers from this side, knowing that there's not going to be a whole lot of passing volume? To me, that's just something that you got to consider with all the teams here on this slate. And to me, what it's going to boil down to is the receiver position is going to boil down to who can get volume and who can score touchdowns. And so it's going to be real interesting to see how this slate breaks out. But what I do like about this slate is the options at quarterback are honestly probably some of the best we've seen for one of these midweek slates in a long, long time. I think there's three very legitimate options at the top of the board. So let's go ahead and talk about game number one. We've got Jacksonville State heading to Virginia to take on Liberty, the no longer undefeated Liberty Flames, thanks to their loss against Kanas State last week, which was a huge upset. Liberty is 1-point favorites in this game with a game total of 63.5 points. This is the higher total of the two games on the slate. Anytime you have a total over 60, you really want to be targeting that game. Meaning with a total of 63.5, the implied total is about 32-31 in favor of Liberty. I do not do decimal points on the implied totals because you can't actually go out and score a decimal point on a football field. So let's talk about Jacksonville State. So Tyler Huff is their quarterback. He's been listed as probable in this game. I don't really see why he wouldn't play. Not to my knowledge, I don't think he left the Middle Tennessee game early. I think he was just kind of banged up at the end of it. This is primarily a rushing quarterback. He has ran for over 100 yards 3 times this season. He's had double-digit rushing attempts in every game that he started and finished. Basically, the only dud game he's had this season was the first game against Coastal Carolina where he was splitting snaps. Ever since he's been named the starter, he's been over 26 fantasy points in every single game. And in Conference USA play, he's been just even better. 39 against Middle Tennessee, 27 against New Mexico State, 46 against Kansas State. This is just a fantasy point machine. He's going to do it via his arms, via his legs, and he's got a ton of touchdown equity as well. With Jacksonville State projected to score 31 points, you got to think that he's going to count for multiple touchdowns. You got to think that he's going to pay off that salary of $9,800. And this is a slate where I don't find it all that difficult to build lineups. So I do think that you can pay all the way up at $9,800 for Tyler Huff and feel pretty good about it. Jacksonville State, from a play calling perspective, they're one of the run heaviest teams in the nation. They rank 7th in the country in rush rate. But like we mentioned, a lot of that is going to Tyler Huff, so that doesn't really faze me a whole lot. Liberty's a really good run defense, though. They only ran 113 rushing yards per game. So you've kind of got strength going against strength there. And that leads me to believe that we might see a little more passing volume from Tyler Huff than we get out of most games. At the running back position for Jacksonville State, they do have, in my opinion, the best running back play on the slate. That is Trey Stewart. So Trey Stewart has just been an absolute beast since Conference USA play has started. In the 3 Conference USA games that he's played, 40 against Kennesaw, 37 against New Mexico State, 33 against Middle Tennessee, over 33 fantasy points in every single Conference USA game. He's got a ton of upside. He's gotten over 100 yards in all those games. He's got over 20 carries in all those games. He is the running back in this offense, in one of the run heaviest offenses on the slate. I think he's an absolutely great play. I don't think that you need to be myopic in playing Huff or Stewart. I think you can play both of them together. I think you can play a combination of either one of them, but I think that they're both great plays. They're both among the top plays of their position on the entire slate. I think that Stewart is by far the best running back play on the slate. I don't often lock people into lineups, but I'm very much considering doing so with Stewart. Now, also, we talked about on the small slates how running back twos can win you a slate, especially when they find the end zone. And Andrew Paul is probably the best running back two on this slate, in my opinion. He's only $3,500 on DraftKings. He's gotten 11 and 5 rush attempts in the last 2 games. But what is notable is that he tends to come in and vulture touchdowns away from Trey Stewart. Now, is that something that's super reliable? No, but you got a running back two in one of the run heaviest offenses in all of college football, and they're implied to score 4 touchdowns in this game. I think that $3,500 is a very reasonable price to pay for Andrew Paul. I think that if you want to fade Trey Stewart, I think it makes a lot of sense to try to play Andrew Paul. I don't think I would go with both of them together because I think a lot of Paul's production would come from vulturing touchdowns from Stewart. So it doesn't really make sense to play both of them together. But I do think that among these 4 teams, Paul is probably the most clear running back two that has a pathway to succeed. Now, at the wide receiver position, I will say some of these teams have committees at running back, so more on that a little bit later. At the wide receiver position, CamVaugh and Michael Petway both got the double-digit fantasy points last week, but they got there in different ways. Michael Petway got there because of a late touchdown. He only had 3 catches for 25 yards, but the touchdown gets him to 11.5. Remember, he was their number 1 wide receiver last year, so I don't think he's an unreasonable price. I don't think he's an unreasonable stacking partner with Tyler Huff, but CamVaugh, to me, is the guy I want. He gets targeted more deep down the field than Petway does. He had 4 catches for 82 yards against middle. To me, he's just more likely to get more catches and yards than Petway. And really, if he scores a touchdown, he could absolutely nuke at his price tag at $4,500. I'm going to be honest, though, those are really the only 2 receivers that I'm really considering. This team just doesn't have enough passing volume. They don't have enough guys that are consistently a part of their offense on a week in, week out basis to allow me to recommend them with comfortability outside of Vaughn and Petway. On the other side of this game, we've got Liberty and Kaden Salter. Kaden Salter has been a massive disappointment in fantasy so far this season. This guy, if you were doing best ball drafts that used all of college football, or you're playing college fantasy football that uses all of college football, he was probably the top drafted, or at least top 2 or 3 drafted quarterbacks in your league. And he's just not been great. He hasn't really given us any ceiling performances. He's had 3 games in Conference USA play over 23 fantasy points, but none of them have been over 27. So that just, it's not been great, but we know that he absolutely obliterated Conference USA last year. This Liberty offense is still running the same system as last year with Jamie Chadwell as head coach. So I think that this is a pretty good buy low spot for Kaden Salter. We know what his capability is. I don't mind the idea of playing both quarterbacks from this game and hoping that it absolutely shoots out and that the 2 quarterbacks are the ones producing the production. I think the Salter's a really solid play at $7,300. That's the bottom line. I think that his ceiling is much higher than what he's shown. I think that you can really play him. If you're really concerned about recent production, then go elsewhere. But I really think that he's due for some ceiling performances, and this could be one of them. This is a pretty good matchup on paper for Liberty. With them running that Jamie Chadwell offense, they rank 22nd in the country in rush rate. Jacksonville State gives up 179 rushing yards per game. So there's definitely an opportunity for Liberty to have some success on the ground. At the running back position, this is almost a 50-50 split now between Liberty. They run this Jamie Chadwell offense where they play 2-back sets quite a lot, and there's a lot of option looks and RPO looks with those 2 backs. And so you can get kind of these results where sometimes the running back 2 is going to outcarry the running back 1. Last week against Kanas State, Quentin Cooley only had 9 carries for 37 yards. He was a massive failure as chalk last week. Billy Lucas, had a little more success, 11 carries for 52 yards, but the most notable part is that Lucas did out-carry Cooley by 2 carries. Is that going to happen week in and week out? No. Quentin Cooley, he's been great this season. He's been great last season. He's generally a pretty good play at the running back position, but he really struggled against Kansas State. Maybe Kansas State showed the blueprint for how to shut down this Liberty rushing attack. So I don't think I'm as high on Cooley coming into this week as I was last week. I necessarily don't think that Billy Lucas is a super great play, but I think that you definitely, if you're playing enough lineups, you want to get access to both of them, in my opinion. At the wide receiver spot, Treon Sibley is very clearly Liberty's wide receiver 1. he did score a touchdown in the Kansas State game. He tends to be their leading receiver more often than not. What happened in the Kansas State game, though, was that Reese Smith did not travel. He was previously one of their best receivers heading into that game, but he did not travel, did not play. So what you saw was Elijah Canyon have a really good game, 5 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown, seemingly returning from injury or returning just from being out of the rotation. I couldn't find anything on Twitter about him being injured. Also couldn't find anything on Twitter about him being benched. So either way, maybe it was the Reese Smith injury that did it, but 5 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown for Elijah Canyon. It would stand to reason that if Reese Smith is going to be out again, Elijah Canyon could be in line for a good workload in another big game. Dante Liu Jr. also had a pretty sizable game with Reese Smith out of the lineup, 4 catches, 38 yards, and a touchdown. Saw 6 targets in that game. So really, if we get no Reese Smith, I am definitely considering both of those guys. I do think that's a situation you want to monitor. Mobley and Hanshaw are also guys that are going to be like almost every down players in this offense. So those 2 guys are guys that you can consider as well. But like I said, I think Stribley is the wide receiver 1. I'm interested in Smith if he plays. If Smith doesn't play, I'm more interested in Canyon and Lee Jr. If you're playing enough lineups, Mobley and Hanshaw can be considered for your lineup. All right, that does it for game number 1. Let's take a quick breather, and then let's talk about the last game of the night. Now, before we continue with game number 2, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I do try to tweet out all updates for the show on there, and if you're ever looking for my opinion on anything with a lineup or a start sit or anything like that, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to, let you know my thoughts via the Twitter. Also, I'm in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Fantasy Corner Discord is a community of a lot of really smart, really good people who play DFS for a lot of different sports. College football is one of the chats in there that is the most jumping. NBA's been pretty active recently. NFL's been pretty active recently. College basketball is going to be real active in a week. So if you're looking for people to talk DFS with, I cannot recommend that enough. There's also some people in there who are really good at, looking up and identifying when guys are in or out of lineups in terms of like their injury status. So if you're just looking for help with that, I think it's a great place to go for that. There's a lot of really informed, really hardworking people in there that can help you out. Also, if you want to know who makes my actual DFS lineups for every slate, whether I have an episode or not for it, no matter what day of the week it is for college football, every single slate, I will be posting my core plays to my Patreon. Patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks is where you can find those. Now, I will not just guarantee that you can just plug those in and just win thousands of dollars. It's not that easy. But what I can guarantee is that you're going to get well thought out, well-researched thoughts that take into account X's and O's of college football, as well as ownership and DFS game theory in order to build effective DFS lineups and help you improve your process. So if that's something that interests you, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. All right, let's go ahead and continue now with game number 2, which is Kansas State heading over to Kentucky to take on Western Kentucky. I actually believe, ironically, that Western Kentucky is in Bowling Green, Kentucky, but yet Bowling Green State University is in Ohio. Yeah, I believe that's accurate. We played Western Kentucky once when I was at Charlotte, so I know very little about their location. Anyway, on the Kansas State side, I forgot the game total. My bad. I got distracted there. Western Kentucky is 24-point favorites in this game with a game total of 50.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 37-13 in favor of Western Kentucky. Keep in mind, Kansas State did win as big underdogs last week against Liberty. They're getting a little more respect on the line on this one. On the Kansas State side, this is a team that I'm probably not going to be targeting very heavily. This is a very run-heavy team. They rank 6th in the country in rush rate. Keep in mind that the service academies, Air Force, Army, and Navy are 1, 2, and 3. So there's only 2 other teams in the country that rush the ball more than Kansas State does. Davis Bryson was reinstalled as the starter last game. He had been the starter for most of the season. They had been unsuccessful to that point, and so they benched him for a game. Neither of the backups played very well at all. They brought him back against Liberty, and it was his second best fantasy performance of the season, 13.5 fantasy points. But this is just not an offense that is very high-powered. He only attempted 20 passes in that game. He only ran the ball 8 times, too, so he doesn't give you a whole lot of rushing upside. This is just not an offense that runs through the quarterback. To me, he is very clearly 4th on the quarterback totem pole, and even if you're thinking, well, Mike, everybody thinks this about Davis Bryson, nobody's going to play him. Yeah, you're right. So he is going to be low owned, but what is the upside? I just don't see a scenario where this guy scores 20, 25 plus DraftKings points. Now, like I say all the time, sometimes in DFS, a bad play becomes a good play when no one plays him and he goes off. But I just don't see that as being very likely when you look at what this Kansas State offense does. Now, at the running back position, these are the guys that I'm probably most likely to play on Kansas State. They have a very 50-50 backfield committee between Quay Ashley and Michael Benefield. Ashley is more expensive. Ashley has been slightly more productive over the course of the season. But last game, Michael Benefield actually did out-carry Quay Ashley 16-12. Benefield was the more effective runner, 16 rushes, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Ashley ended up having 12 carries for 52 yards and a touchdown. Ashley did see more usage in the passing game, so Ashley ended up with more fantasy points. But to me, I would kind of rather play Benefield at a cheaper price tag than pay up for Ashley. But these are kind of the two guys and the two ways that I'm going to be targeting this Kansas State offense. Because when you look at the receiver position, my God, I mean, they just play a massive rotation of guys. It's not super consistent. It's not really anything you can bank on. It's just whether or not a guy can happen to score a touchdown or happen to make some big plays. I'm going to continue to bang the drum for Jaden Robinson for this team. 3 catches, 72 yards against Liberty. It was his best game yet. He's a true freshman. He's kind of the guy that I think that if you're Kansas State and you're looking to the future, this is a guy that you can start to build around. $3,400, I don't think that's a terrible price tag to pay for a guy that's a big play threat like that. Christian Moss scored a touchdown last game, 2 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. Maybe that's a sign of thing to come. I don't know. This is a guy who is a Virginia Tech transfer, so he's clearly talented. I don't know. After that, Blake Bohannon, the coach's son, has probably been the most consistent producer. I did watch that game against Liberty last week, and they really targeted him in high leverage situations. Like in the fourth quarter, they were really throwing him like some jump balls and some contested catch opportunities. So maybe is there a chance that he could just have a big game just based off of them, kind of just throwing it up to him every now and then? Of course, but I just don't know. After that, Tykeem Wallace is a guy who gets a decent amount of targets, but they're not really lucrative. 4 catches for 10 yards last week. And then you have Carson Kent, who was their most consistent receiver heading into the Liberty game, and he was not targeted in that game. I don't know what happened. So this is just an absolute mess at the wide receiver position. I named all the names that you need to know, but I think you can avoid it altogether. I think there's other cheaper receivers out there that I would rather play. Like I would personally rather play Vaughn or Pedway at 4,500 and 4,100 than any of the Kansas State guys. I would rather take chances on Canyon and Lee if Reese Smith is out for Liberty than any of those Kansas State guys. There's guys that we're going to talk about coming up for Western Kentucky that I would rather take chances on than those Kansas State guys. So that's just how I see it. I'm probably not going to be playing a whole lot of pieces of that Kansas State passing game. Now, speaking of a passing game that I'm going to be playing, let's talk about Western Kentucky. So this is the most pass-happy team on the slate. They are the only team on the slate that actually passes the ball over 50% of the time. And they're about middle of the pack for the entire country. But compared to the rest of this slate, they're going to throw it all over the yard. Kansas State is a defense that you can kind of do what you want to do against them. And what I mean by that is they rank outside the top 90 in both rush yards allowed and pass yards allowed. So they're not a good defense. You can kind of, take your pick in terms of how you want to move the ball down the field. Kaden Veltkamp is going to be the quarterback on this slate who has the most passing attempts. He's going to be the quarterback on this slate who is most likely to get 300 yards. He also has a little bit of rushing upside. So I really do think he's a really solid quarterback play. I think in terms of what he's done so far this season and the matchup that he is seeing, you have to consider him as the QB2 on the slate behind Jacksonville State's Tyler Huff. Veltkamp's been insane in Conference USA so far. 3 Conference USA games against Middle Tennessee, UTEP, and Sam Houston State. He's been over 30 fantasy points in every single one of those games. His price tag is $7,800, is not that far ahead of Kaden Salter, and he's just been the better player than Kaden Salter so far this season. Yes, we love the potential of Kaden Salter, but if you're actually looking at the matchup, you're actually looking at what has been shown so far this season, you got to say that Veltkamp is the better option to play him. That being said, am I going to play both Veltkamp and Salter in a lot of my lineups? Yes, I am. But if I'm ranking them, it's Huff, Veltkamp, Salter, in my opinion. At the running back spot for Western Kentucky, here's the troubling part. This is the country on the slate with by far the lowest rush rate, right? But this is also the running back on the slate who has the largest share of his team's carries. Elijah Young is an absolute workhorse back. He's seen over 16 carries in each of the last 3 games, varying amounts of success depending on if he scores a touchdown or if he gets involved in the passing game. So I do think that he's a really solid option, but just know that you really need him to be the one running back that gets carries for them to succeed, because there's going to be less carries to go around for this backfield than the rest of the other 3 teams. The other thing that Elijah Young does have going for him is that Veltkamp is a little bit of a runner, but not like a heavy runner like a Tyler Huff or a Kaden Salter. So it's kind of less likely that the quarterback vultures are rushing touchdown from him. But yet at the same time, he's only scored 3 touchdowns all season. So I don't know. This is just such a conflicting player, in my opinion. I would personally rather just target the pieces of this Western Kentucky pass game, but Young is definitely one of the top running back options on the slate. And if you can afford him, I definitely think he's a guy that I'm going to be getting to in a decent amount of my lineups. At the wide receiver spot, Western Kentucky has, in my opinion, the two top wide receiver options on the slate. The first one is Keyshawn Johnson. He's just been the most consistent receiver out of any of these teams all season long. He's been great. We know that Malachi Corley graduated from Western Kentucky and somebody needed to fill in for that role. They haven't really just given him the Malachi Corley volume, but he's been pretty darn close to it. He's at $7,500, but he's worth every penny, in my opinion. He's clearly the best receiver option on this slate. On the offense that is clearly going to throw the ball most. Like, if you're going to be targeting some rando wide receivers, why not target them on the offense that is going to throw the ball the most? Easton Mestre, I believe, is the second best wide receiver playing on the slate. He's been seeing a pretty consistent amount of volume as well. Against Sam Houston, neither Messer nor Johnson really got going, but prior to that, they've both been really consistent, really effective all season long. Johnson does slightly get more targets than Messer, slightly more catches, slightly more yards, but I do think that they are quite clearly the top two wide receiver options on the slate, and I do not mind double stacking them with quarterback Caden Belkamp because, like I said, this is the offense that's going to have the passing volume on the slate. So these are the receivers that I want to be playing. So if you're looking to play some cheap receivers, why not play them on a team that's going to be throwing the ball quite a lot? Well, Dalvin Smith and River Helms are both nearly every down players for this team. Dalvin Smith is like this wide receiver tight end hybrid that lines up all over the field. They use him in some really creative ways. He's only $4,000. He hasn't been super productive this season, but he's not a bad play. River Helms is a traditional inline tight end. When he scores a touchdown, he's a good play. When he doesn't, he's not. And then you're going to get cameos for some other wide receivers as well. Michael Matheson had a huge game against UTEP. Scored 3 touchdowns in that game somehow. Random big game out of him wouldn't shock me. You also have KD Hutchinson down here at $3,000 that plays a decent bit. Had a long touchdown against Sam Houston State. Wouldn't shock me if he caught another one. So I don't mind getting to those cheap random receivers because they're the offense that's going to have the passing volume. All right, but that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need to know if you want to build some winning lineups here for this Wednesday night slate. If this helps you out in any way, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton when you guys hit the like button on YouTube. It helps me out a ton when you guys rate and review the audio as well. So help me out. Help me help you. Like the YouTube video, rate and review the audio. I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate when you do that. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of the content all season long. Remember, if you want more from me, follow me on Twitter, join the Fantasy Corner Discord, head on over to the Patreon for those core plays. I will be back tomorrow night to cover the Saturday main slate. No promises on any of the other slates for the rest of the week, but if you're subscribed, you will know when they drop. But that's going to do it for this episode, guys. I'm really looking forward to our last week of Q's action because next week is the start of Maction. So hopefully we can make it a good week, make it a profitable one by playing some DFS on DraftKings and FanDuel this week. Best of luck to you guys on these Tuesday and Wednesday night slates. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.